So let's get started. I will and pretty shortly I'll have a video to show. It's 12 minutes long. I'll introduce the nature of the video. Very important. So hopefully that doesn't bore you. I don't think it will. Okay. So I'm gonna get the slides ready. Here we go. All right. So hi everyone. It's Michael Wayne again. This is a presentation, a webinar on the coronavirus, the Chinese medicine integrative science approach. And so we're going to look at this. We're going to look at the coronavirus, talk about some of the science of viruses, and then also look at it from a Chinese medicine standpoint, and more also from an integrative science approach. And what I mean by integrative science is the science of chaos theory and complexity theory. I'll also sprinkle in a little bit of epigenetics. These are much more integrated science approaches that encompass more of the whole organism and the more variables that we have that are part of life. And what I'll be getting at is ways to build your health, ways to protect yourself from the foundation, from the inside, and from the root, and ways to keep healthy, and ways so that you allay the fear if you're feeling any fear, because fear is pandemic right now. And we'll talk about fear in a little bit. So the next slide. This was a clip that was in an article in the New York Times this morning. And I just took this clip out because it kind of goes to the heart of talking about complexity theory, the science of complexity. And what it said, the virus is seen to outpace governments at many steps along the way, and much about it remains a mystery, despite perhaps the largest concentrated global scientific effort in history. So that's kind of mind-boggling, this largest concentrated global scientific effort in history. A lot of good scientific minds, and the virus remains a mystery. Why is that? Because viruses also abide by the laws of complexity. All of life does, but we've pigeonholed ourselves into this very black and white binary way of seeing the world, good and bad. And it's just, it doesn't work. We want certainty. Much of life is uncertainty. And that's one of the things that complexity theory tells us. The body is a very interesting organism. Complexity theory also tells us that there's a self-organization method that goes on with all the working parts and kind of a synchronization. And so what does it tell us about ourselves when a virus, any virus, viruses are millions of years old, and yet it's bringing the world to its knees, that it remains a mystery. But the thing is, due to the complex nature and diverse nature of viruses, they don't follow predictable patterns, and because of this, it's hard to control viruses since they seem to have a mind of their own. We'll talk a little bit in a little while. So basically, we can sum up what I just said in this simple phrase that was once said by a very wise man, a very sage man, a man who's been known as a guru to the world, Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra said, "It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future." So Yogi Berra, that great science of complexity theory, understood that, it just, variables happen. And there's just, so what I'm getting at, like all this modeling about how this virus is going to go, nobody knows how it's going to go. I mean, we're following and we're seeing what's happened, but anything could happen. It could just dissipate tomorrow. Viruses only have a lifespan of so long. And also, I just want to show this slide. The last webinar I did was Visioneering the Future, and I read this quote. It's a quote from the economist Milton Friedman, who says, "Only a crisis actually perceived," and it's safe to say we're in a crisis right now, "produces real change. When that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around." And I bring that up because in crisis situations, when there's a lot of turbulence, humans are capable of making great evolutionary leaps. In the Visionary in the Future webinar they did last time with Ioannidis Judith, and that I'll do next time, we're going to look at ideas that are possible that could change society. But there's also, in this webinar now, I'm talking about things that we can do to make evolutionary leaps in our human body, that can change us, change who we are as people, humans from the inside out, make us more healthy. So next I want to show you a video. It's this man. And let me just give you a little introduction. It's 12 minutes long. And he's got a white, he looks very white with his red tie. He's Greek, actually. His name is Dr. John Ioannidis. You should remember this name, because when Dr. John Ioannidis talks, people should listen. Dr. John Ioannidis is a medical doctor. He's also a medical scientist and researcher. He's an epidemiologist. He's a professor at Stanford University. He's also the co-director of the Meta Research Innovation Center at Stanford University. He's also world-renowned, the eminent source on understanding the validity of scientific studies and scientific data. He has written a paper that was that is the most downloaded paper on scientific websites, and it's a paper on why most scientific studies are flawed. So in early March or mid-March, he wrote an article that was on a scientific website looking at the pandemic as it was and questioning, will this be something horrible or not? He said, at that point, he said, we need more data. He wasn't saying we should not go to the efforts we're going to deal with this, the doctors and the hospitals, but he just said, are we jumping to conclusions? Then 2 weeks later, which 2 weeks ago, he did this interview. It's an hour long, and I edited it down for 12 minutes. So I'd like you to watch it. It's very compelling. So here we go.
There's a couple more settings where we have fairly unbiased data. One setting that has emerged in the last few days is data from Iceland. Iceland is a small country that really pays a lot of attention to science. They have a wonderful cohort. It's called Decode, and they have set it up to measure genetic risk factors in the Icelandic population. They have decided to get volunteers, and they do that for a number of days now. Obviously, it's not entirely random, but it comes as close to being random as possible. And until the last data that I saw, they had an infection rate in the population of 0.9%, which you extrapolate to 360,000 people in the Icelandic population. It turns out to be about 3,500 people being infected. And of those, only one fatality has occurred so far. We have one death, and there's also some people who have some severe symptoms. One death corresponds to 0.03% infection fatality rate. Obviously, if there's more deaths, that will go up. But if you compare that to seasonal influenza, which is 0.10%, it doesn't look that bad. It could actually be even less compared to seasonal influenza, although I would not be surprised if it's higher, but not really much higher. The last situation where we have an entire city being tested is the city of Vo in Italy, in a situation where we have the most dramatic events happening so far for the pandemic. That city had an early death of an elderly individual with underlying diseases, and they decided to test everyone in the population. So they tested 3,300 people, every single citizen, and they found an infection rate of about 3%. That was in the third week in February. So most likely in other communities in Italy where the ability to contain the virus was not very successful, it's very likely that the proportion of people infected continued to increase pretty rapidly. It would not be surprising if in some locations in Lombardy, we have currently reached infection rates of 20 or even 30%, but this is still a bit speculative. If that's the case, then you need to correct the infection fatality rate or case fatality rate for Italy that seems to be very high by a very large factor. It could be a correction of 100, for example, that needs to be applied. And then the infection fatality rates would drop again close to the range of seasonal influenza.
If it's possible that the death rate in Italy would need to be corrected by a factor of 100, what explains, I mean, we hear that there and in so many other places that the medical system is already being overwhelmed and there are these shortages. So what would account for that if indeed the death rate is likely lower than they say it is?
I am collaborating with those who are leading the Italian response, and I'm trying to get their insights. And this has been a very interesting puzzle that we have been brainstorming on. There are multiple explanations so far that can be proposed on why Italy really became such a disaster. And these include the following. First of all, it's demographics. Italy has the most elderly population in Europe and one of the most elderly populations in the world. It is far more older people on average compared to a country like the US or most of the other countries. And we know very well that SARS-CoV-2 has markedly steep increase in mortality in people who are very old. The average age of people who die in Italy is 81 years old. And also, most of these people have lots of other underlying diseases. Italy is a country that has a very strong history of smoking. It has very high rates, therefore, of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It has very high rates of coronary heart disease. And these are very strong risk factors for having a bad outcome in this infection. If you want to transplant these data to another population, you need to account for that differential case mix and try to adjust accordingly what your expectation would be in a different country. Another observation that has emerged is that many of these people probably would have had very limited life expectancy in the absence of that infection. And it still remains to be decided how many of these infections are deaths with SARS-CoV-2 versus deaths by SARS-CoV-2, meaning that the virus has the key influence on the outcome rather than just giving a final kick or participating among many other factors in shaping the outcome, but these people having multiple other reasons that they would have a very poor endpoint and eventually die, many of them. There's also other things that probably got wrong in Italy. Italy has a relatively low number of ICU beds per population. It has about a third of ICU beds per population compared to the US. And their system is running at full capacity practically every winter at 95 to 98%. So if you get just a little bit extra, you're very close to the point of collapse. And we know that in winter, there is a 25 to 30% increase in the number of deaths compared to summer months. A major part of that contribution is deaths due to respiratory pathogens, and typically every year this is due to influenza. Now this year it could be influenza plus SARS-CoV-2, but you realize that a system that is so close to saturation, to having its maximal capacity, if you add just a little bit more, it can very easily collapse. Italians were the first to be hit in Europe, and that was an exotic pathogen. Everybody thought that they had to do their best. So they said, we need to admit these people to the hospital, even if they had modest or not so severe symptoms. This resulted in a very bad decision-making, and I think that this is something that every other setting that is hit by an epidemic wave needs to avoid. By admitting these mild or moderate cases very quickly, they became saturated, and when they started getting the severe cases, they just had no room for them. So also the hospital became heavily colonized with that new virus. This is a virus that can stay on surfaces. Many of their medical personnel got infected in that heavily infested environment. About 3,000 people in the medical personnel in Italy got infected, and they had to leave the battle to be in quarantine, making things even worse. So there's a lot of factors that created like the perfect storm. And I want to remain optimistic that if we do not panic, things will be okay. I don't want to diminish the size of the problem. And of course, there is uncertainty and people may have that fear because of that uncertainty. But there's a very good chance that we will be able to weather the storm.
Doctor, to that point, you were saying that if this hadn't been singled out in some way, and given that most of these symptoms present exactly the same way as a flu or cold, it might have gone unnoticed. How does that square, though, with what seems to be this major stress on, say, the New York healthcare system? If this was just, let's just say it was another flu, would we still be seeing the same sorts of stress, or are you saying that the panic helped engender the stress?
I think it's a combination of both. And even with influenza, we have variability in the rates of infection in different localities and in different hospitals that get more of an infectious load every winter. And as I described in the situation of what happened in Italy, it was some hospitals that were completely overwhelmed and most others were not. So there is that variability and we need to take that into account. But it's not just the average variability that we see every year. You have on top of that a very acute situation, a situation of perceived crisis. A situation of crisis, you have media following every step and every second what is going on with every patient, with every single death. And can you imagine what would have happened if 60 million deaths that happen every year in this planet, we had a meter counting them one by one and having stories written for each one of them? It would be horrible. I mean, we have gone into a complete panic state, measuring so far a sizable number of deaths, but nothing close to the total cumulative mortality that we see both in this country and around this world. I think that that panic component and that overemphasis of media attention is probably making things worse. We do want to sensitize people to follow instructions, to try to keep the public health measures, to shelter in place if they have sheltered in place. But we don't want to get them scared. We don't want them to get into panic. This doesn't really help. I think that we need to be patient and not panic and not reach for foregone conclusions at this stage. There's a lot that we have to learn. And I think that there's a very high chance that we are exaggerating. As we discussed, many of the features of this pandemic, of course, are serious, but I think that the estimates are exaggerated. And I think that there's a risk of really making some fundamental decisions about the structure of our civilization, of our society, of our future that may not be appropriate. I think that we have no clue how a society would work if you need to build it around a construct where everything is done from a distance. I'm willing to accept that in a short term, you want to do your best and throw your best tools and try everything, but thinking of a society that is just entirely imprisoned and telecommunicating is a very different beast, and it's something that I'm not even sure that it is tenable. It creates a very different environment. It creates a different environment for our ethics, for our ability to socialize, for democracy, for what it means to be human.
Okay. Yeah, so that was Dr. John Ioannidis. And I want to go over a few of the facts that he mentioned and also say what another important part of what he was talking about is the variables. And that's what complexity is. Many variables. We can't just say this happened, therefore that's going to happen. So for instance, he mentioned that many of the people who died in Italy have had underlying disease. Turns out the study by the Italian government found that 99% of those who died from the coronavirus had another illness. And in this graph, we see that almost 50% of the people in Italy who passed away, and we grieve for every person who passed away, so I don't make light of it, but almost 50% had 3 or more illnesses, 25% 2 or other illnesses, another 25% 1 other illness, and then a little less than 1% no illness. So there are underlying factors that precipitate this. And furthermore, another thing that Dr. Ioannidis mentioned, but he didn't use this term, iatrogenic disorders, which is the 3rd leading cause of death by recent studies in the US and Britain. But what he mentioned was that the virus ran endemic in the hospitals as more and more people were in the hospital. And because, as well known, hospitals are very sterile, antiseptic environments, and they breed these superbugs like MRSA. So makes sense that the virus would run amok in a hospital. So an iatrogenic disorder is a disorder inadvertently induced by a healthcare giver because of surgical, medical, drug, vaccine treatment, diagnostic procedure, and I would add the medical setting, like a hospital. And so this was John Hopkins did the study, the recent study, and it's the 3rd leading cause of death. 250,000 people, they say, die from it, though some say 440,000. So it's quite a large number. So what categories do we put these passings from? As Dr. Ioannidis said, that we don't know who passed away from the SARS-CoV-2, the official name, the technical name of the virus, or with. Furthermore, this is something, and I don't mean to scare any of you here, especially if you're 65 years or older, but I just want to point this out. This was information that in the US Center for Disease Control put out, that the people who are at more risk for COVID-19, people with serious underlying medical condition. And so they said, people 65 years or older, and that's because in this binary way of thinking, it's people who are 65 are not in good health. You know, some people who are 65 or older take care of their health and have a lot of vitality. A lot of people, though, 65 and older have some medical conditions on various medications. So yeah, it's unfortunate. People who live in nursing home, people of all ages with underlying medical conditions, including chronic lung disease or asthma, serious heart conditions, immunocompromised people, people with severe obesity, people with diabetes, people with chronic kidney disease, people with liver disease. So there are reasons that this virus is taking lives at the high number. And this is some of the reason. I'm going to go over some US healthcare statistics, and I apologize for that the type is a little small, but let's look at this. And for any of you, if you're listening from another country, I apologize for not having your country's health statistics or other health statistics, but just, the US is known as the least healthiest country with the worst health outcomes and the highest amount of money spent on health. So healthcare spending in the US in 2019, $3.6 trillion. 230 Americans have chronic disease. 50 million, at least 50 million, I would believe it's more, have autoimmune disease. 37 million Americans have chronic lung disease, and that's, people who are definitely susceptible to SARS, COVID, coronavirus. 121 million Americans have heart disease, 30 million Americans with chronic kidney disease, 80 million with liver disease, 10 million immunocompromised, 100 million Americans diabetes or pre-diabetes, 40% of Americans obese. By 2030, 50% will be obese. Then from January 1st of this year to April 5th, when I looked at the statistics, $55 billion has been spent in the United States on obesity-related diseases. And then when I looked at the statistics, which was on Sunday, April 5th, $300 million spent just that day in the US on obesity-related diseases. And then overall in the world, 753 million people are obese. That's 10% of the world's population. Prescription drug expenditures in the US in 2019 was 360 billion. And that last line just says per capita Americans take 12 medications each. So it's no secret, as I said, that America has really poor health outcomes. We are not a wellness-oriented society. I could go into this, I could get on my platform and talk about this a lot. We'll leave it at that. I could, start to get into the realm of politics and public health and so on. And there's only a little political stuff I will say towards the end, but otherwise, I think this speaks for itself. And then, Dr. Ioannidis was talking about, there's 60 million deaths every year in the world. What would happen if we highlighted each one? I just want to run the numbers through you. For this year, 2020 so far, as of midday, April 6th, yesterday, which is when I checked the statistics, there's been 15.5 million deaths this year, 3 million people who died of hunger, 222,000 who died of water-related illnesses, 3.4 million communicable disease deaths, 128,000 seasonal flu deaths this year, and the list goes on, 444,000 from HIV, 2.1 cancer, 100,000 malaria, 1.3 million deaths from smoking, of which 1.4 billion cigarettes have been smoked so far this year. And then with all these numbers, deaths from alcohol, deaths from road traffic, suicide, deaths from coronavirus, 71,000, not making light of it. And that's yesterday midday, the numbers have gone up, but I'm not making light of it, but it's unfortunate. So this is the butterfly, and why I show this picture is going back and talking about complexity again. I talked about how our world has a lot of complexity, and our great sage Yogi Berra said, you just can't predict the future. And Dr. Ioannidis outlined all these variables that are at play. So the butterfly effect is a famous idea coming out of chaos and complexity sciences that a small ripple, a small flapping of wings of a butterfly can cause reverberations that are hard to predict all over the world. It's kind of a metaphor, but it says that one little action can create all kinds of actions. In mathematics, it used to be understood that the shortest path between 2 points was a straight line. So it sounded very linear, made it feel comfortable. Oh, everything is so linear. You do this, this happens. Then Einstein came and blew it all apart when he showed that space-time is curved, and showed, because of that the shortest path between 2 points is a curved line. So all of a sudden we have a variable. Unfortunately, our sciences, except for complexity and chaos science, these integrated sciences, are a little bit behind the 8 ball. So speaking of that brings us to the feared viruses, the mysterious virus. Viruses live by the laws of complexity too, just like humans. So in a way, viruses and humans are symbiotic, and not just in a way, they are. The viruses are major drivers of human evolution. Over the millions of years that viruses have been around, and the amount of time that they've landed in humans, and it all depends on host susceptibility, which I'll talk about in a little while. That viruses impart DNA into their human host, and 10% of our genetic material is viral in nature. There are certain evolutionary steps we've taken along the way, and as humans and Homo sapiens have walked this planet, that occurred because of viruses. So it's a very interesting thing. And viruses are not malicious. They're intelligent. They're full of complexity. They have a drive to them. Their drive is to reproduce inside a host. And so they're always on the lookout for a susceptible host. There's 6,500 mapped out viruses that their DNA has been mapped out. And the coronavirus, the current version, is 80% similar to the SARS virus of 2002, 2003. That's why it's called SARS-CoV-2. And so every time a new virus is mapped out, it's called novel. And that's why you hear coronavirus is novel. So it's not some horrible thing that's like out of a science fiction movie. It's coming after us. Because this is the fifth of the coronavirus family. The four prior are endemic to the population of the world. They exist. They make us sick. The common cold, the rhinovirus, is a coronavirus. The influenza is a coronavirus. SARS was a coronavirus. But we developed the immunity. You know, a few people sadly pass away from influenza every year, but most people, it's just a major inconvenience. A week or two, they feel sick. Common cold, you know, you get the cold and, you know, it passes after 7 days or so. And this current version, this CoV-2, the current iteration of the coronavirus, also will become endemic to the population as more people are exposed to it, because they will develop the immunity and there will be a herd immunity factor. So as I said, viruses basically have a job: find a host, replicate. 250 of these known viruses enjoy the company of humans and look for humans to be their host. And the thing about viruses, though, is they do not want you to die, the human host, because if you die, they die. So they prefer you stay alive. They prefer they replicate in you, they transmit, and then they just peter out. They go away. And so, unfortunately, it's really it's a formula. It's a combination of the two. It's the virus, the condition of the host, the human. And as I showed you with the health statistics are not so good in the US, and therefore the US has the most cases. And I don't mean to blame anyone, you know, or make anyone scared. What I will get at is, as we go on in just a little bit, is there are ways to become healthy so you never even have to worry about getting sick, or if it gets you sick, you know, just, you know, mild sickness. And so with that, viruses have a secret altruistic life. As I said, they enter humans in their altruism, and they just want to impart DNA, and they want to help you evolve. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. And so it's not like, so that's the thing. Showed you the first slide, this mysterious virus that the greatest minds of science are after. We have to understand, how do we have this symbiosis together? Now, I'm going to start talking about some health things. First off is from Johns Hopkins. This was some fact sheets from Johns Hopkins talking about viruses and so on, and how to stop them from spreading in different ways. And this last point on this slide, I circled, says the virus cannot go through healthy skin. So that's important to know. What they're saying basically is that viruses cannot affect healthy people, because to have healthy skin, you have to be healthy. If you have that, the skin is the largest organ of the body and is the container of the body. And if our internal environment is healthy, our skin is, as an expression, as the largest organ, will stay healthy. So there's two ways to have healthy skin: our internal environment, how we take care of our health, and external, what we put on our skin, meaning what is the body care products you put on your skin, or deodorants you put on your skin. Are they chemical? Are they natural? What kind of detergent do you use? Do you use chemicalized detergent with fragrances that come up against your skin? What kind of clothing do you wear to put up against your skin? So many factors create a healthy skin. You know, it's also known that the virus can enter through mucous membranes of the face, orifices, mucous membranes. But it's the same thing. When you're healthy, the mucous membranes are also healthy. So talking about healthful ways, talking about the skin, if you go, you look around now, you're hearing information on natural remedies. We're going to talk going even deeper than just these natural remedies. This is kind of like the first stop. And so it's going around, understandably so, about high dose of vitamin C. That's well known. High dose of vitamin C boosts the immune system, so 1 to 3 grams daily. In China, they were doing intravenous vitamin C feeding of people, and in some of the new hospitals, they were doing that too. Vitamin D, 1,000 international units for adults. The recommended daily allowances is usually 1,500 to 2,000, so you could go higher with that D3, that is. Vitamin A, 900 micrograms, 700 for women. Eat a lot of vegetables, you'll get a lot of vitamin A. Zinc also is known for fighting viruses. A couple different herbs. Elderberry as a syrup is known for its antiviral capabilities, and echinacea. And then a few essential oils, tea tree, cinnamon, lemongrass, blue gum, thyme, thieves. So these are all some good natural remedies. Then I want to go a little deeper and talk about Chinese medicine. Many of you may know I'm a practitioner of Chinese medicine, acupuncture. So I know a fair amount about this. And so this is the classic book of Chinese medicine, the cover of it. Well, it's a cover of one of the versions. The Yellow's Emperor's Classic of Internal Medicine, known as the Neijing. And it's the foundational book. Many books have been written since. The book was written 2,500 years ago, and it's a series of dialogues between the Yellow Emperor and his personal physicians. It starts out, he's talking to his personal physician, Qibo. And in this beginning of the book, again, written 2,500 years ago, the Yellow Emperor asks, why are people not so healthy anymore? Why are they not living as long as they once did? So interesting, 2,500 years ago. And Qibo said, they've lost the way, meaning like the Tao. They do not eat well, they don't sleep enough, they're running around, basically saying burning the candle at both ends. So basically, again, saying that they're not living in harmony with the Tao, the ultimate foundation of Chinese Asian thought, the Tao Te Ching, the symbol of yin and yang, the harmony of opposites, meaning that when we live in balance, when we live in harmony with nature, when we have more integrity with our way, we stay healthy. When we eat well, when we eat in harmony with nature, all these things, we stay healthy. So it's interesting, 2,500 years ago, if we could put the Yellow Emperor and Qibo, his physician, in a time capsule and bring them over here, 2,500 years later, they'd be saying, the Yellow Emperor would be saying, oh, Qibo, I guess things weren't so bad 2,500 years ago. Look at these crazy people now and what they're doing to themselves, how they're polluting themselves. So when we don't live in harmony with nature, with ourselves, when we don't understand some of these fundamental tenets, what happens is we see everything as war. Everything is the other. We have fear of the other. And so now it's the virus is the other. And now it's like, oh, we're at war with this enemy combatant. You know, Trump has called himself a wartime president. You see the terminology. We're going to crush this enemy. We're going to defeat this enemy. This is not, that's not the right terminology. It's not an enemy. That's what I'm trying to say. The laws of complexity show us that viruses and humans are symbiotic. But what happens with this language, and so it's like, you don't necessarily see fear in the media, war language all over the media, but it gets into the consciousness of the journalists who are covering it, and it just, the headlines get blaring, and it just doesn't serve anybody. And what happens is it causes massive fear. And it really leads to a fear pandemic. It leads to what's called fear contagion. And that's when fear can spread with fear contagion from person to person faster than the coronavirus. Fortunately, there are ways to slow it down, which I'll mention in just this 2 slides. But this fear is just going crazy. And this came from an article written by a psychiatrist about fear in 2020, about fear contagion, how it happens automatically, unconsciously, making it hard to really control. It's really like the stampede mentality. It's a phenomenon that explains mass panic attacks that can occur during music concerts, public gatherings, or if someone yells fire in a crowded theater. Once fear is triggered in the crowd, maybe someone thought they heard a gunshot, there's no time or opportunity to verify it. Everybody runs for cover or runs for the doors. Or it's like Black Friday. Everyone runs in Walmart and people get trampled. You know, it's like every year or so, someone actually dies from getting trampled on Black Friday. I mean, that's just crazy. And that's where everyone starts running for their lives, and these mass panic end up with tragedy. So here's this photograph of someone watching the TV, the light of the TV on their face, holding the remote control, and he's just mesmerized and hypnotized, and he's just in such panic mode. You know, maybe you know someone yourself or someone just watching the news, and just like, it's almost like a drug, and it just takes us over. And that's why the importance of stress management is more important than ever. You know, first and foremost, we know that with stress, the immune system's ability to fight off infection is reduced. So stress promotes inflammation. The hormone, the cortisone, the corticosteroids are just released. Corticosteroids are released by the adrenal glands when we're stressed, and it can suppress the immune system response. And can also cause, you know, not being able to sleep, snacking, drinking, smoking, just unhealthy behaviors. You know, it becomes a vicious cycle. And as this paragraph shows, there are latent viruses in the body, and I'll talk about that just a little bit, but latent viruses in the body that carry diseases like herpes and chickenpox, shingles. Shingles is the chickenpox virus, latent, and just comes out in times of stress, and can also cause fever, flu-like symptoms. So the importance of relaxation, stress management is so important. It increases immunoglobulin A, so it's just, you know, just one of the immune proteins. But the most important thing is this last paragraph. You don't need a therapist to relax. I mean, not saying if you want to see a therapist, you know, through Zoom, obviously these days, but, you know, talk to your therapist. But otherwise, meditate, read, listen to music, be an engaging hobby, talk to friends, even if it's virtual, do crosswords, walk in nature, do yoga, you know, whatever, you know, exercise, whatever engages you fully and takes you out of your head, just to really just breathing deep and just not let it get to you. Otherwise, it just feeds it even worse and just makes things worse. So I've been talking about complexity. I want to talk about it in the human body to understand the best way to live in harmony with viruses, so to speak. So we'll start, so let's look at the body head to toe. The brain, this is a picture of the brain, an artist's rendition, all these nice colors, but this is what the brain looks like. And the brain has 86 billion neurons joined together through 100 trillion connections. It's quite a work of art, the brain. All those, all the synchronized connections that the brain does, so much that goes on that you know, calls it a complex biological machine. I wouldn't use a machine, but just a biological organism, living, breathing organism. But through all those synchronized mechanisms of the brain, we sleep, we talk, we read, we just do our everyday functions, and it's just incredible. And it's just amazing. And then the human body is just quite a work of art, quite a work of complexity. All the digestive organs, the circulatory system, our endocrine system, all the things that it working in harmony is capable of allowing us to function in everyday life, reading, thinking, talking, sleeping, making love, digesting, eliminating. It's you know, it's, when you think about it, it's in awe of the human body and what we're capable of, and all living life. It's just amazing. It's just complex. And then when you go even further within, you enter the realm of the body's microorganisms, the microbiome. We have trillions of microorganisms in our body, in our gut, in our immune system, and these are bacteria, these are yeast, these are viruses. So that's what I was talking about earlier. I said the latent viruses that can be activated by stress. But that doesn't mean these viruses are going to kill us from within. When we are in healthy condition, when we're living in harmony, when we live with the harmony of opposites that the Tao teaches, all these various parts of us and our gut bacteria keep us healthy. And so it's when we take care of ourselves, we have the ratio is of more beneficial microorganisms. When we're unhealthy, when we're not in good health, then more of the detrimental microorganisms take shape, and those latent viruses. And that's where I mentioned the statistic that 50 million Americans have autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease is basically your immune system gone haywire, and it's like viruses taking over. So who cares about an outside virus? When you're not taking care of yourself, it takes over. And that's the thing about illness that it would be great to learn in kindergarten for school children, for any of us, that when you get ill, it's the body giving you a message that, hey, it's time to change course. It's time to do something different, time to change the diet or get more sleep or take care of yourself or get out more, whatever it is. But instead, most people just run to the doctor, take a drug, and it's basically the Band-Aid approach to get better, to go out and keep on keeping on, for better or worse. And so with these biome, it's science is in a funded by the NIH, Human Microbiome Project, to understand this world, this universe of microorganisms that live within us. You know, they'll address the role of the microbiota in inflammatory disease, in various diseases, but you know, you don't have to be an Einstein to know that when you're not taking care of your health, these things just run amok. And this is the complexity of the body. And so I found this online, the Institute of Complexity Medicine, a center of teaching of excellence dedicated to exploration of medicine from the perspective of the complexity sciences. Boy, is that needed more than ever. You know, teaching complexity so that doctors could see that the body is, you know, this complex adaptive mechanism, and that drugs sometimes is not the right approach. You know, there's probably about 10% of or 20% of drug therapy that's necessary. The rest of it is, don't get me started. So I'll leave it at that. So let's talk more about Chinese medicine. Talked about complexity. Chinese medicine, such a great way to develop complexity. Chinese medicine has a number of modalities, and I'm going to talk about acupuncture, Chinese herbal medicine, and food. Acupuncture kind of rewires the body to allow it to be more complex of body and mind. And then there's Chinese herbal medicine. Chinese herbal medicine is really, it's hundreds, thousands of years old. In China, they've dealt with epidemic diseases for hundreds and hundreds of years in using Chinese herbal medicine. Chinese herbal medicine is a form of medicine, herbal medicine, in which anywhere from 4 to 20 different herbs are used. It's very sophisticated. I practice Chinese herbal medicine the most traditional way, so I know a lot about it. And so these herbs there's 4 to 20 herbs. They're put together based on the person's condition and their presenting signs. And it creates a lot of complexity in the body, which allows that complex situation. Let's say a virus, which is a complex biological agent, instead of trying to fight it and kill it, going to war, it's trying to harmonize with it and just let it mellow out and let it dissipate. And it's a brilliant system. There's a number of, and actually in pharmaceutical medicine, drug medicine, drug cocktails, formulas called cocktails, have been used also specifically are successfully in the treatment of HIV. That was when the treatment of HIV started turning the corner, when drug cocktails, a number of drugs together, also creating a lot of complexity. You could say complexity is the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. You put a few things together and a lot more information comes from it. So this is, I thought of about 8 herbs and I thought, oh, this is a great herbal formula for corona. It's, these are Qinghao, wormwood. Wormwood is actually, Qinghao is an anti-malaria herb used for malaria and also was a very popular herb for AIDS patients. Chuan Xin Lian, Andrographis, Wang Lian, Coptis, Wang Qin, Scutellaria, Chinese skullcap, Shengdi Wang, this one here, Romania root or Chinese foxglove, Yin Chen Hao, Yin Chen Hao, what happened to that? The picture is actually underneath, sorry for anyone who can identify herbs. Yin Chen Hao, Artemisia capillaris, and then a couple of tonic herbs, Wang Qi, astragalus, and Gansao, licorice root. Licorice root gets used in a lot of formulas as a balancer. There's a lot of thought that goes into the crafting of a Chinese herbal formula. It's kind of an art form, but it's the science of complexity. You know, medicine used to be called an art, the art of medicine, the art of healing. Now it's just a technological science, a bioscience that's just so stuck in binary thinking. So in the treatment of coronavirus, there is a drug cocktail that's being touted. This caption up here came from an article in the New York Times, and that was the picture there, about a so-called self-described simple country doctor, a doctor in upstate New York, who, an Orthodox Jew who's treating mainly a Jewish community, Orthodox community. He touted, he was using this on his patients, and he made a video about it, shot up on YouTube, a lot of people watched it. It got the attention of Donald Trump, and then all of a sudden people started touting this as the cure. So you've heard about this anti-malarial drug that's being touted as the cure for COVID-19 by certain quarters, that is. You know, Dr. Fauci, Anthony Fauci, is not in the corner of it, but Donald Trump is, and some other people. And it's a 3-drug cocktail. The main drug that you hear about is Plaquenil, the anti-malarial drug. It's also called chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine. It's in the quinolone family, which I'll mention in just a moment. Then there's also the antibiotic Azithromycin, or Zithromax, a popular one used as a Z-Pack for people for a couple of days, respiratory infection. Though in 2013, the FDA issued a warning that azithromycin can cause abnormal changes in the electrical activity of the heart that may lead to a potentially fatal irregular heart rhythm. And then the last of the 3, zinc sulfate. So, and I mentioned in the natural remedies, zinc is antiviral, antimicrobial. So forget the cocktail, just take zinc. So about quinolone, the Plaquenil, the chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine that we're hearing about and being touted by some, the quinolones is a class of drugs that should have been taken off the market a long time ago. There's been class action suits about, again, some of the drugs in this family, but you know, drug companies just pay the suits off as collateral damage. And so these are, the most popular of the antibiotics in this class are Cipro and Levaquin. Levaquin given for sinus infections, Cipro for UTIs and other uses too. But they have black box warnings, which are the strongest warning the FDA gives. And it signifies that studies about the drug indicate the drug can cause significant risk of serious or life-threatening adverse effects that could kill you. People affected by quinolone are said to have been floxed after the full name of the class of drug, which is fluoroquinolone. And I've had patients come to me who've been floxed. I once wrote an article, and I had a lot of people contact me about it and led me to support groups. And it was just broke my heart to hear the stories of people. One of the most common side effects of the quinolones is tendon ruptures, especially of the Achilles tendon. So this is not so good. It's really like the cure being worse than the disease. And I hope it doesn't go very far. And then today I came across a headline that Donald Trump has a stake in a hydroxychloroquine drug maker. And no surprise, that's my political spiel for today. I don't even know if I can say any more about it. Just upsetting just to even see that. But yeah, that's not good. Anyway, so let's talk about. Yeah, I'm trying to stay on positive notes here. So let's talk about the other aspect of Chinese medicine: food. Food is medicine. And that was also the founder, the father of Western medicine, Hippocrates, also said, "Let food be thy medicine." And it's a really sad state of affairs in our country here, or here in the U.S., where so many people, food is a danger. You know, to caution, allergens, put up the police tape. You know, all these foods people are allergic to. You talk to a teacher, and they'll tell you, you know, all the students, they have lists of all the students and all their food allergies, and they just make it simple, telling, you know, letting parents know you can't bring eggs or whatever foods. And it's just, it's really sad what we've become, that food is our enemy, but it doesn't have to be that way. And food is really the greatest, most important, most integral way of building the foundation. And here I'm going to talk about a macrobiotic diet, because that is really, as part of Chinese medicine, though it comes from traditional Japanese medicine, but it's a really amazing way to build complexity and diversity in the body, in the microbiome. It starts out, and if there's anything you get from talking about diet, it's this elimination part, eliminating sugar, which only feeds yeast, whether a virus external invading you, or all those viruses that you have ruminating in your body, eliminating dairy, eliminating processed food, not eating nightshades, which cause a lot of inflammation in the body, the tomatoes, potatoes, eggplant, pepper, zucchini, eating organic, eating foods native to your locale. I mean, not necessarily that they grow in your locale, but they could in your temperate zone, or whatever your zone is. So you're kind of like in harmony with nature, in harmony with your environment. And then eating whole grains, brown rice, millet, barley, rye, wheat, corn, oats, buckwheat, quinoa. And that's, you know, there are quite a few people now who are allergic to whole grains. Grains are whole cultures, traditional cultures all over the world. They are the most evolved food of all time. If we want to evolve ourselves and who we are as humans, that the best way, the best symbiotic, synergistic way is eating whole grains. Whole grains are the only food that the seed is also the fruit. What you plant is also what you eat. And that's why there's a saying in Japan, 1 grain, 10,000 grains. You plant 1 grain of rice, a plant grows with all rice seeds on it that you eat, but then you can also plant it and grow more seeds and more seeds. And 10,000 in Asia is the signifier for infinity. So from 1 grain, you can feed the world. You can, everything is infinity from there. So eat whole grains, the most perfect food. What do we do in the US with grains? We grow corn. We feed that corn to cattle. That gets fattened up, and then we eat the cattle. What a terrible use of food, the environment, land. Anyway, that's a whole nother discussion again. So eat legumes, including tofu and tempeh, vegetables, sea vegetables, pickled fermented food. Small amount of pickled fermented food every day is so important because they are so rich in that microorganisms. So you eat that and it just feeds all the microorganisms in you. It just makes everything more fertile in a good way. And then occasional small amounts of animal food if you so desire, if that's your choice. But you know, using it as a smaller amount, not this main dish thing that most Americans, most people do. Eating sourdough bread versus, so this is naturally leavened bread versus yeasted bread. Yeasted bread, this yeast that gets added to bread can affect us in a negative way, our own organisms, the microflora in our body. Cooking, stainless steel, ceramic, glass cookware, cast iron. Maybe I left some others out, but not in Teflon or other non-stick cookware, aluminum cookware. It's just poison, toxic, and just toxifies our body. Pressure cookers are like the greatest way to cook certain grains that cook longer, like rice or millet, barley. Millet grains take a little while. And then there's all these superfoods too that macrobiotics and traditional Japanese medicine introduce. Miso, which is very popular and very rich in, again, those microorganisms. Tamari, soy sauce, also fermented. I mentioned the seaweeds before. Umeboshi plums in paste, also aged plums that they're so medicinal and really good tasting, like great to add to foods. Then foods you may not know about, mochi, tekka. Then eating root vegetables such as daikon, burdock, lotus root, jinengjo, which is mountain yam, taro potato, and then seitan, which is somewhat popular, kuzu, and then some other things on that last line, canton, natto, shiitake mushrooms, and more. If this fascinates you, you can just look it up. Again, you can go through this recording again. You can get macrobiotic foods all kinds of places these days, readily accessible in local natural food stores. Some may have it. Farmers market, well, farmers market, you just get lots of vegetables, all kinds of vegetables. Online distributors, Gold Mine Natural Foods, Natural Import Company, Eden Foods, Maine Seaweed to get seaweed. Go Macro for macro bars, great little snack bars, really, it's like excellent quality. Amazon, the big monolith, Amazon has some of these foods too. And then little tools here, a pickle press, where you could make your own fermented pickled vegetables, or you could just put vegetables in a bowl, put salt, put a plate on top, put a rock on top of the plate. But whether one way or another, you can ferment your own very easily, all kinds of vegetables. Stainless steel pressure cooker for the grains, and miso. Miso gets made in the US along with other countries, but this is a company, South River in Massachusetts, that makes organic miso, very number of brands. I should have put that on where to get them, but see. So macrobiotics is really such an important integral way to develop that complexity, diversity that of that microorganism of your microbiome. So if you need a little Western science mixed in with Chinese medicine and talking about how you can change your health, what better way than another type of science? It's really complexity science, because it's really about the understanding how humans biological transformation or biological transmutation, we can change. That's again a thing about a bioscience. It's all about how binary everything, how fixed it is, sees the body as a machine, as a plumbing system. Our body changes and can change rapidly. And so epigenetics is really the science of this. It's a study of how the expression of DNA can be changed without changing the structure. So through lifestyle changes, diet and lifestyle, you can have your DNA express itself in a very healthy way, in a good way, which will lead to better health outcomes. It may not change the structure of the DNA. So this leads to things like understandings of how diet can change your DNA, can help it express itself in a better way. If you're eating a healthy diet, a macrobiotic or just a healthy diet, and if you're not eating a healthy diet, then it leads to DNA expressing itself in not a great way. And recent studies suggest the food you eat could modify your genes and potentially your children. And a book that was written about epigenetics, Change Your Genes, Change Your Life. So change your genes by what you eat, the lifestyle, the stress management, and you can just become a healthier person. Forward by Andrew Weil. So this, people take this seriously, the epigenetics. And then another book, Epigenetics in Life, What We Eat, How Diet May Influence Epigenetics and Our Health. So kind of reiterating the same thing. So just kind of saying it in a few different languages so you can help Western science, Eastern science, to help you understand. We have nothing to fear. All we have to do is take care of ourselves, live in harmony with the Tao, whatever way you want to see it. You know, the facts are not as black and white as we see. We heard from Dr. John Ioannidis. So if any of you are interested, need some personal help or guidance, I'm happy to do online coaching, and I can go over diet, herbal medicine. I can make Chinese herbal formula for you, talk about lifestyle, exercise, stress management, well-being emotionally, looking at life purpose, visionary in the future. And if you're interested, you can contact me at my email address, mwayne2@mac.com. If you get the emails from me, you know, if you're on the email list from the film, you also get, you know, you can reply to an email. So that is the gist of the, here I am back in full screen again. That's the gist of the slideshow. I've given you a lot to think about, and I'm hoping that you may want to, if you have questions to ask, if you'd like to, you can put it in the Q&A, you can put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. Be happy to have a little discussion right now. You know, I gave you a lot. Perhaps I'm preaching to the choir, perhaps I'm not, but it's really, we are really masters of our fate. We really can take care of our own health, and we really don't have anything to fear. You know, this is a pandemic right now. We're all worried about the coronavirus, but it cannot affect people who are healthy. The viruses are, you know, I pointed out, showed the facts. The viruses are attacking or going after those who are not healthy. And I don't make light of it, and I grieve, you know, we should grieve for every person who's suffered and had a trouble. I have a question from Lisa. Does licorice root raise blood pressure? Safe for someone with hypertension? Yes, really depends. You know, a lot of these things, there is actually a physician's desk reference for herbs, and some of it is a little misguided. To have, and like ginseng too, which is a great herb, has also been said to raise blood pressure. To have an issue with it, you have to do it in high amounts of licorice for a long period of time. And as I said, licorice in Chinese herbal medicine is used as a balancer. It's usually used in small amounts as a balancer for the other herbs in the formula. So it would be really hard pressed to take licorice at a high dosage for a long period of time. And so what happens is that sometimes information comes out and it's not fully formed. That's why when I introduced John Ioannidis, the doctor, I said he is the world's foremost expert on the validity of scientific studies and scientific data, and his paper is the most downloaded paper on scientific websites. Why most scientific studies are flawed, because the way the information is collected or just the study is just poor. So information like that it could raise blood pressure. And again, not discounting that, just saying, Lisa, that it would really have to be taken at high dosage for a longer period of time to have any problem. So I hope that answers the question. So if anyone else has any questions, I'm happy to answer. You know, I gave a lot of information, tried to move through it as fast as I could. You know, diets and talking about nutrition, it's an interesting thing because sometimes it becomes, it gets so broken down and reductionist, like, oh, eat this food for vitamin A or eat this for this. You know, food is, it's not the way to look at food as a collection of vitamins and nutrients. It's this whole organism. And really, the healthier you eat, the more complexity that is created in the body. So, you know, so we've gone an hour and 10 minutes, just about as long as I did with the other webinar earlier. And I have a question from Steve Feathers. What if we don't follow the guidelines to slow the spread of the virus? Do you think we'd be much worse off? You know, that's a good question, Steve Feathers. In that, you know, and you saw Dr. John Ioannidis, in questioning the data, said, you know, for now we should follow the guidelines. you know, I hate to see, you know, I wouldn't go against the public health advisories. What makes me sad is seeing the fear in people's eyes walking down the sidewalk. Someone may come in the same way, and just like we separate, you know, out of fear. You know, I fully so I err on the side of caution right now and go with the guidelines. But we need more people developing immunity. We need more herd immunity. So as Dr. Ioannidis said, after a while, this is untenable to be living by Zoom and virtual contacts and all this. Even though, you know, I think some of you are enjoying working from home or having more free time and all that. But we have to start that, and that's what I felt. At least I'm going to put his name in. Let me just. There it is. I think I just sent it. Oh, hopefully I just wrote it and it went to you, or it went out there. If not, put it in the chat box, or I'll do it again in the chat box. Excuse me for a minute here. For anyone interested in knowing about him more. And that's in the chat box. So the more we understand about self-mastery in terms of our human health, our human evolution, in terms of health, the better off we'll be, because this really is a challenge. It's really kind of a wake-up call, a message from the virus in a way, saying, dude, you've got to change your evil ways, as Carlos Santana said. I mean, kind of joking, but we've got to understand the way of life, how much food plays a role in the way of life. I mean, it's not rocket science, and it's no secret how terrible the American diet is. And you know, there's so many motives in why, so many reasons for why people don't eat well, from self-responsibility to corporate influence. And again, you know, it's really sad to see what's happening in this country in terms of the health and the coronavirus, you know, coming after Americans way more and more virulently than anywhere else. But if we understand the logic of what's going on, we'll see. So if we take care of our health, you know, we'd be better off. And I think, you know, as I said, I'm not going to go against public health guidelines at this point, but there's going to be a point where we need to build herd immunity and get together with people and realize that we're better off together. And again, statistics of, you know, I went over statistics of people passing away from all different reasons. So, you know, there's people die from all kinds of things. And again, not making light of that. So anyway, if anyone else has anything they want to chat or put in there, as I said, the recording, made a recording of this afternoon and tonight, and one of them will go out, not both, whichever one I think is better or about the same. So if anyone else, and again, if there's any interest in health counseling, coaching, I'm happy to do that. So otherwise, you know, I haven't seen any questions or chat come in. So imagine that means you're all ruminating and kind of taking it in and you know, and gave a lot to go over. And I hope, you know, giving you some food for thought, no pun intended. All right, so otherwise, I think I'm going to call it a night. Thank you, everyone. We've gone an hour and 15 minutes. Thank you for your patience and staying along. Have a very good night, and all my best to you. Much peace, much love, and that's it. Oh, I'm sorry. We've had a question. Judy Joy Wild. Thank you, Judy. Lisa asked, do you think acupuncture is beneficial? Absolutely, absolutely. I mentioned that in Chinese medicine, it really can help. And Gloria, I'll just type it in. Let's see. John Ioannidis. There it is. Does that get there? John Ioannidis. I hope that got in there. I'll put that in when I send the follow-up email, I'll put that in there. I'll just kind of recap and send that to. He's real, like I said, he's a man, when he talks, you want to listen, because he's such a breath of fresh air, and he's really just a I mean, just the beautiful soul that he is comes through in even the video. So, okay. Otherwise, I want to thank you all again so much for taking the time, and I'll be doing more visionary in the future workshops, because of the fact that this is part of our challenge and our evolution to something new, to create a utopia. So on that, I will leave and say blessings to all. Good night.